So Neil deGrasse Tyson, ladies and gentlemen, not the first time we've discussed this man on this channel, and the more I think about it, it probably won't be the last either. Once again, he has decided to show the world that, in fact, he's not in touch with reality. I think that's the best way I can put it, which is kind of concerning given the industry that he's in. If you've been paying attention to Neil deGrasse Tyson recently and you've heard what he's been saying, preaching progressive talking points, woke culture, woke ideology, you sit there and you hear what he says and think to yourself, well, I do anyway, maybe it is time to, in fact, get off this planet. He was just on the Bill Maher podcast, and whilst I don't agree with what a lot of Bill Maher says and where he stands politically, at least he's somebody who has the guts to challenge somebody like Neil deGrasse Tyson, who needs challenging, trust me. And because of that, well, the conversations they end up having end up getting a little bit heated. Bill Maher and Neil deGrasse Tyson clash over woke college campuses. You should be calling them out. Maher also confronted the famous scientist for his comments on gender and trans athletes. HBO host and comedian Bill Maher clashed with popular astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson on Maher's Club Random podcast on Sunday over how to address woke college campuses and transgender athletes. Tyson brought up how Maher no longer performs stand-up on college campuses and asked if the comedian was writing off an entire generation by refusing to adjust to the shift in what students find acceptable to joke about. So why is it their fault and not your fault, he prodded Maher. Maher defended his stance, saying literally every comedian has abandoned performing at colleges because they can't avoid offending students. He slammed Tyson for not calling out the far left's threat to free speech on campuses. I have given up on any place that doesn't remotely attempt to believe in free speech and thinks that anything that they hear that they don't like, that they don't agree with, is violence. These people are effing nuts. Yeah, you're right about that one. And you should be calling them out, Maher charged Tyson. You're doing what parents do. You're taking the path of least resistance and therefore hurting the kids and yourself. Parents ruin both their lives. They ruin the effing spoiled kids' lives, and they ruin their own lives because the kids rule the roost. So that's what you're doing on a national level, he told Tyson. Tyson retorted that he wanted to avoid alienating his younger audience by navigating the landmines of the culture so he could still have an influence. It's not good enough to be right, you also have to be effective, he argued. So that right there, where you hear Neil deGrasse Tyson say, I still want to have an influence, could be him admitting that sometimes he might censor himself, maybe say the right thing so he could still have an influence, because as we know, when you start doing the opposite and you talk about things you shouldn't, your influence in the mainstream media does diminish. So maybe he's sold out, and maybe he's just adopted the woke mind virus and he's going full steam ahead with it. I mean, apparently, according to this scientist, it's Bill Maher's fault for not adjusting to what students find funny today, which is nothing. Because a lot of the time these liberal students remove the idea of freedom of speech and they don't like anything that might be deemed offensive.
How dare you say such a thing? That is a terrible joke. How could you say something so triggering to all of these communities? We must cancel this man now.
A classic thing you can hear today, right, when a comedian or just about anybody makes a joke. They shouldn't. I can't imagine what it's like on some of these college campuses now. Just imagine if they invited, which they probably wouldn't, but just imagine if they invited a slightly offensive comedian and they said a slightly offensive joke. Oh boy, I can guarantee you they won't be allowed to perform at another college campus, and if they are allowed to, before they even get there, whilst they're driving up to the campus, they will be confronted by these masked woke liberal students trying to cancel them. That's what people deal with today. It's absolutely crazy. But here is Bill Maher talking about the things that we've discussed so far and absolutely goes in on Neil deGrasse Tyson, which must be quite strange for him, because normally when we see him talk, he likes to talk over other people. Take a watch.
Surely there's a portfolio of jokes that would still work on a college campus. Surely.
I would hope not. From what maybe some college campuses, the ones you read about are insane.
You've given up on an entire generation, and you don't know how to make them laugh.
I have given up on any place that doesn't even remotely attempt to believe in free speech, and thinks that anything that they hear that they don't like, that they don't agree with, is violence. These people are nuts, and you should be calling them out. Somebody like you, who has standing with kids, should be not joining them.
When there's a science objectivity to it.
You're doing what parents do. You're taking the path of least resistance, and therefore hurting the kids and yourself. Parents ruin both their lives. They ruin their spoiled kids' lives, and they ruin their own lives because the kids rule the roost. So that's what you're doing on a national level.
I'm feeling more like on the porch. Get off my lawn.
Damn, some words Neil deGrasse Tyson probably doesn't want to hear, but I think he needs to hear. Now, this wasn't the only part of the conversation that got a little bit heated. There is another part people are discussing, because we all know Neil deGrasse Tyson's position on women's sports. He is all for the idea of men competing against women. You know, he thinks there should be categories based on hormones. But it definitely solves the issue that women's sports is facing. It really does. I don't know why nobody else has come up with it before. Really, I don't. I think everybody prefers the stance, you know, of women competing against women and men competing against men. Seems pretty simple. Later on, the pair moved on to debate what should be done in athletic competitions with transgender athletes. Tyson suggested that competitions like track meets should be divided into hormone categories, like wrestling is categorized by body weight. Right, what the to settle concerns about transgender men having an unfair advantage in women's sports. So all I'm saying is, what is it that makes the man, the scientist asked? Is it the hormones? Okay, if it's the hormones and you decide to give yourself a different cocktail of hormones, I'm making this up by the way, yeah, of course you are. I'm not saying it should happen this way, it's a way to start thinking about it. Maybe the track meets have hormone categories. Oh, my brain. I'll leave you guys to discuss that part, right? My brain can't take it. After sighing at Tyson's suggestion, Maher challenged Tyson to agree that cross-hormone therapy was not healthy. Would you not just admit that? Do you think we can just safely do things like this, he asked. Instead of answering Maher's question, of course he won't, Tyson suggested that the host's concerns about the health effects of these statements were disingenuous. So you feel this way because you are so deeply concerned about the health of the people who try to find their place on the gender spectrum. You care about their health so much that you don't want them to go through with that, he asked. Maher retorted that while it doesn't keep him up at night, he does care for the well-being of every person. He quickly wrapped up the conversation soon after, admitting they wouldn't come to a consensus on the issue. Yes, it does concern a lot of people. Unfortunately for you, Neil deGrasse Tyson, people are concerned about this treatment, this medication people are taking, young adults, and how it's affecting them, because the mainstream media won't talk about it in that way, will they? They paint it as this thing that is sunshine and rainbows, and it's the best thing for people to do. You know, if a young adult is questioning this thing or that thing, go ahead, take some hormones, puberty blockers. You know, it's the best thing you can do. When in reality, this place people seem to avoid so much today, in reality, it does have negative effects on people mentally and physically. To give these people hormones, puberty blockers, just so, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says it, you know, these people can find their place on the quote-unquote gender spectrum without any regard for the side effects, just because, you know, how somebody feels, we should reaffirm that without any regard for the side effects, is shameful. But I am sure all the women that heard your stance on women's sports and your solution to it, you know, they're over the moon. They couldn't be happier with your solution. Really, they couldn't. Anyway, here is the clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Maher discussing women's sports and the issues it is facing. Take a watch.
Match more interesting for the viewer. So if we can split wrestling into 10 categories, and that becomes the wrestling match.
But all men against each other.
Correct. So,
okay,
so
again,
now I get
sort
that.
of key point.
Okay. Okay. So all I'm saying is, what is it that makes the man the man? Is it the hormones? Okay. Is it, if it's the hormones and you decide to give yourself a different cocktail of hormones, I'm making this up, by the way. I'm not saying it should happen this way. It's a way to start thinking about it.
It would be
maybe the track meets have hormone categories.
And maybe giving yourself the wrong hormones is deleterious to your health. Would you not admit that? Do you think we can just safely do things like this?
So you feel this way because you're so deeply concerned about the health of the people who are trying to find their place on the gender spectrum? You care about their health so much that you don't want them to go through that?
It's not something that keeps me up at night, but when the subject comes up, I care about them like I care about all people. So if there is something...
You do, by the way. You think about all people.
Of course.
Yeah, I give you that.
Oh, okay. You're being
sincere? Think about all people. No, I'm being sincere.
Yeah, I do. Yes. Yeah. Old school liberal.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want all people to have, you know, make this very challenging world that we live in better. So that's why there's honest debate about this issue. And why don't we cut it off?
Keep debate honest. Yeah.
Why don't we cut it off now? Because, like, we're not going to solve this. We said our pieces. We get it.
You know, you got to remember this is a astrophysicist. He works in the world of science. Just let's all remember that one. right? I don't think this man also realizes there is no route for a fair competition when you allow men to compete against women. You know, just being born a male gives you advantages that you're always going to keep. If you go through puberty as a boy, right, and then you take these hormones, puberty blockers, that's not going to get rid of the biological advantage you have. You cannot change that. Unfortunately, again, for you, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you can't change that. And then even if you allowed men to compete against women, if Neil deGrasse Tyson got his way, just imagine that, how would you solve the safe space issue? Would women's safe spaces be compromised because of how somebody feels? And when I see men who advocate for this, which I assume Neil deGrasse Tyson does, to me that shows me how emasculated these people are, because men want to protect women. Men want to keep women safe. They don't want them to feel the opposite. But leave your thoughts down below, ladies and gentlemen, on Neil deGrasse Tyson. I'm sure many of you have a load of thoughts to share on the clips I showed you, the article we talked about. I look forward to seeing it all. If you have enjoyed today, then please for me also, make sure to leave a like rating. If you're new, hit that subscribe button and turn on bell notifications so you never miss a video. Share this video. But until next time, it has been your boy JD. Have a great day, stay safe, and I'm out. Peace.